Do you want to learn how to aim like this? Well, in the last week, I was able to transform my aim entirely by implementing a brand new aiming technique that I like to call the spider method. And you might want to hear this because the thing is, aiming in Valorant just got a lot more difficult. In patch 6.11, Riot made a massive change to their game and people have hardly mentioned it. But I quite literally believe that this is one of the most groundbreaking changes that have been made to Valorant in recent time, and it's impacting every single one of you right now. Riot jacked up the inaccuracy while moving with the Vandal, Phantom, Spectre, and Frenzy from 1.5 all the way up to a punishing 1.8. Or more simply put, they've made the game 20% less forgiving, which is quite a bit. The casual player not paying attention to these changes may have found the game a bit more difficult in the last few weeks, because the casual player likely isn't going to be that good at standing still while shooting. Less experienced players panic and they run around and they shoot before ever coming to a stop. And for a while, this was actually kind of okay. Before, especially in the case of the Spectre and the Frenzy, there was actually not really any reason to stand still, like at all. These guns were so accurate while running that run and gun was the correct way to use these weapons within reasonable range. Even for the Phantom and Vandal, oftentimes the moving accuracy was so forgiving, you could shoot before even coming to a complete stop and still find your mark. Or even better, if you get tagged while moving and shooting, it will drop you down to walking accuracy, which again was super forgiving. But now, if you aren't standing perfectly still while you fire, your bullets aren't going to find their mark as easily as they used to. For super high ranked players, this is going to mean that you will need to be much more precise with your movement. But for lower ranked players, this likely means that you're going to be having a lot less fun if you don't start shaping up now. So, what a perfect time it is for you to start implementing the spider method. This is an aim training method that I've spent the last month perfecting because I needed to fix my aim. Before I tell you what the spider method is though, let me tell you exactly why my aim was so bad. And to do that, let's take a trip down memory lane back to a video that we did 2 years ago breaking down TenZ's gameplay. One thing that may shock a lot of players to hear is that run and gun for a while has been a critical part of TenZ's style. In fact, TenZ abused the RNG in Valorant so well that it made a very convincing argument that every single player should be abusing run and gun, at least in some form during their matches. The reason for this is because this stuff actually does work. Riot has made posts about this before that they don't intend to nerf the running accuracy on guns like the Spectre because these are intended to be guns that you can use on the move. And I'm not TenZ, but I've been applying this stuff myself on guns like the Frenzy, and this is why I can say with confidence these are mechanics you are meant to use. It looks stupid, but us as a community have been brought to believe that run and gunning is bad, but run and gunning is actually really good in many situations. Fast forward to the present with Valorant's recent change, I can't say that we fully stand by this anymore. In fact, the change is so drastic that TenZ himself is reevaluating his own style.
Focus on his movement more than anything. His aim is fucking crazy too, but his movement with his aim, it's like actually like perfect for Valorant. I don't know how to explain it. Dude, this guy, when he was scrimming with us, he was actually shitting on people. It was insane. Like look at, as soon as he sees an enemy, he literally full stops every single time. I don't know how to explain it, but I do not do that.
Valorant's new change targets this RNG abusing style of aim, which while it might not be intentional, this is how most of the casual community aims, and it's probably how you aim too. This is a massive issue for most players, but it's also a massive opportunity for you to get ahead of the curve and start mastering this new style of aim that is going to be taking over Valorant in the next year. Now more than ever, the game demands precision, it demands control, and it demands discipline. To conquer this new era of Valorant, we've identified 3 key elements that every player needs to master. On screen, you'll see the roadmap that we've designed to help you navigate this shift in meta. Not only this, but I also wanted to see if I could fix my own aim in the process. If you go back to the TenZ video, you'll hear me talking about how I worked hard in deathmatch to be able to aim like TenZ. I practiced my movement, and funny as it sounds, I practiced my run and gun, and I found that I got really good at applying this sort of sporadic movement into my gameplay. But as somebody who has aimed like this for the last 2 years, although my movement seems to be a little bit more advanced, I could say firsthand that my aim has suffered. Especially with the new patch, it's time that I switched up my movement. That's why I needed to develop a new routine. A routine that would help me master this new style of aiming and turn myself into a far more disciplined player. I call this the spider method. I know, ooh, ominous. And my goal is to see if in 1 week I could completely transform my aim and become the type of aimer that I believe will excel in the new age of Valorant. If you're familiar with the Miyagi method, the spider method actually is another unconventional method that will change how you warm up. When done correctly, it removes room for error, making it nearly impossible for you to not improve. And lucky for you, I packaged each step of the spider method into a neat little course over at SkillCapped that you can access right now to start improving your aim with me. Don't worry, I'm not going to leave you hanging in this video though. Today we'll be going over the first 3 steps of aiming that the spider method is built on. For some of you, that might be all that you need to know. However, if you want to see how I transformed my aim entirely in just 1 week of practice, then I highly recommend that you check out the full course at SkillCapped so you can see the exact technique that I used. The spider method is a physical adaptation to how I aim, and you won't be able to see this in the video because I don't have a hand cam. You'll see the exact changes that I used to transform my aim in just 1 week, along with 3 additional steps that we discovered players like Shroud use to dominate in every FPS game that he plays. If you want to improve as fast as possible, this is the way to do it. I spent countless hours breaking down every single frame of hundreds of clutches to piece out every little bit of nuance that you can get, just so I could share these secrets with you today. Some of the things that I found are actually really shocking. For example, I noticed that Shroud gets a striking amount of collateral kills and double kills like this one. Initially, I thought that this was all just luck, but there's actually something very specific that he does that allows him to decimate his opponents like this. In our course over at SkillCapped, I will spill all of the secrets. Oh, and if it doesn't help you improve your aim, we will give you your money back. More on that at the end of the video. The first thing that you need to understand with the new age of aiming though, is that when you're moving, your accuracy is going to be significantly worse. This means that you must be standing still during all of your engagements. This isn't anything new. Everyone knows this. But everyone applies this differently, and there's actually a key concept that you've been told for years that is likely holding you back. Take a look at these 2 clips side by side.
What are you on this guy? He's firing now.
Oh my god!
Do you notice a difference in how these players take gunfights? Neither of these clips are bad, but they're very different. It may feel subtle for some, but the second player is actually implementing something that you've been told to do, counter-strafing. Shroud, however, is not. Shroud is releasing the movement key entirely and stopping instantly. Contrary to what many players believe, counter-strafing is not something that will help your player come to a stop faster. And in fact, if you are not precise with your inputs, it might actually make you move more than you would like to, causing you to miss shots. Shroud has a very jarring element to his movement that basically results in him looking like he has his feet glued to the floor. I want to say this again because I think it's very important to connect tips like this to feelings. It looks as though when Shroud is fighting, that his feet are glued to the floor. When you're practicing this aim method, think of it like that. Think of it as you cannot move. He doesn't panic, he's not just spraying everywhere, he just stops on a dime, flicks, and shoots. It's almost as if he separates the process of moving and aiming entirely. And it makes sense if you think about it. Why would you want to focus on 2 actions at once? Your movement is going to move your crosshair, and your mouse is going to move your crosshair, and it just leaves more room for error. Many players may believe, okay, but if you're good enough at the game, you can just use both of these things together. And perhaps this is true. However, if you compare this to pretty much any advice that people will give you, in really any field, it's not incredibly consistent. There have been many studies to back this up. Multitasking in general is something that most humans are not good at. In some cases, psychologists estimate that it can reduce your productivity by up to 40%. That is absurd. And I know that plenty of you are thinking, well, I'm the exception. But just so you know, I used to think this too. I remember in intro psychology class that I took, we ran an experiment where one person would sit in the middle and they would have people on either side of them read 2 different stories at the same time. Then afterwards, we would get asked 20 questions, 10 from each story. Most people who did this got like 8 questions right, meaning that they didn't even follow half of what was going on. I played a lot of video games, so I thought I would excel at this, but I didn't. I got 8 just like everyone else, and it was really eye-opening for me. It's not good to split your attention between 2 things at once. Say you're new to playing piano and you wanted to learn how to play a song. What do you think makes the most sense? Trying to learn how to play both of the parts with each hand at the same time, or trying to figure out what notes each hand needs to play individually and then combining them later? If you had a piano teacher, they would tell you to pick one and focus on it. And while sure, aiming isn't quite the same thing as playing piano or memorizing a story, if you can separate the process of aiming and moving, there is a good argument to be made that you should. Take a look at how Shroud does this. We're going to slow down each clip so it's super easy to see. Take note of how it's almost like a 2-step process that he applies here. He stops moving, and then his crosshair starts to move. And that's precisely what our first step is. You need to remove the room for error. Split up your actions and make them as simple as possible. See, stop, shoot. This is the action that Shroud applies in nearly every single gunfight. You see it here, you see it here,
On chamber. One tower. Or okay, rather.
One closer.
Tower, tower.
Yo, Sam.
You can get me up.
Wow.
And you see it right here.
70 on jet.
Touched out. CT.
One mid dead.
On the wall, one mid.
Down B.
One mid, one mid.
Not gonna be main. No one's in sight, right? God, I hope not.
No, no one's inside. No. One B main and one mid.
Oh!
When I was looking to improve my aim, this was the first thing that I had to practice. As I mentioned before, I got so used to abusing the forgiving RNG in the game, I basically had to relearn how to aim entirely. I'm actually a player who's very prone to panicking at the sight of any potential highlights. When faced with multiple enemies in front of me, I'm very familiar with choking and only coming out with one kill most of the time. But after practicing my spider method for quite some time, I was starting to get more calm with my shots. Rather than panicking and overcomplicating the round, I just stood still, aimed, and shot. It is something so simple, but at the same time so difficult to do, and I feel like a lot of players could find this relatable. If you're able to quickly understand when you have the upper hand in a duel, you can start reminding yourself that in those cases, all you need to do is focus on landing the shot. If you compare this to this Ye clip right here, notice how Ye deliberately stops moving at all when he realizes that the target is on a zipline. If they shoot back, they are going to be less accurate, and they can't strafe left to right, so Ye definitely has the upper hand. On top of this, he's playing in a 2v5 for content, so it can probably be assumed that he's significantly better than the players he's playing against. In this case, rather than overcomplicating things, he just calmly stops and lands the shot. It is very likely that you are moving far too often. For practicing this myself though, I've also deciphered when maybe it is not the best idea to stand still. For example, if you are fighting enemies from 30 meters plus, it's actually really likely that when you swing, you just won't land your first shot. Part of the reason for this is obviously the further away the target is, the harder it is to hit them, but also your gun is just less accurate at further ranges. The Vandal isn't great at 30 meters plus, and even if your crosshairs directly on their head, you might still miss. In this case, it's not always the best idea for you to stand completely still. You may still want to incorporate strafe shooting at further ranges to compensate for your difficulty in landing your shots. Another time it's probably not great to completely stop is when fighting multiple enemies. This is likely part of the reason that Ye implements counter strafing instead in this split clip. In my practice, this is what it looked like. Within 10 meters, crouching is fine. 10 to 30 meters, stand still. 30 plus meters, strafe shoot. And when fighting multiple enemies at once, always stay on the move. This is part of the first pillar of the spider method that you will find on our site, and from applying it, I was already seeing massive improvement. After practicing this for a while, I started to realize that I was getting a bit lazy with my swings though. It's really easy to get into the flow of practicing and start to ignore everything that you're working on. Sure, I'm trying to stand still when I take fights, but how am I actually enforcing this? This is likely what many of you are running into when you comment things like, how come my aim is so much better in deathmatch? You're likely just not really practicing your peaks in the same way that you would perform them in an actual game. This is when I thought about something that I know that Ye does that I felt was a perfect solution to start mastering my movement. Preparing the swing. This is pillar number 2 of our spider method that is listed on the site, and it's something that will be very difficult for a lot of you. It's going to slow down your gameplay quite a bit, however, it's possibly the most important thing that you can be doing if you really want to perfect your peaks. Take a look at this clip from Ye right here.
Nah. Keep it away for you. One?
One just left B main to go tiles. Yeah.
One tiles.
Enemy remaining.
Take note of how he peeks catwalk after dodging the Sova ultimate. It may be hard for you to see if you're not looking at it, but take note of right here. Ye stops just before peeking into catwalk, seemingly taking a short breath, and then swings the angle to instantly kill the enemy omen. This is what preparing the swing is, and Ye does this all of the time. Take a look right here. Or right here.
Finished.
Once again, Ye is not the only one who does this. Take a look at this clip from Alexander, one of the other players that TenZ was admiring in that clip that we showed.
Good. Oh, just wait.
They're diving short. Diving long.
Spike down.
Nice.
Right before swinging out of hookah, Alexander takes a brief pause and then swings out. Stuff like this almost feels like practicing scales in music. It's not particularly fun. Everyone wants to improve fast and just swing everything. But the reality is that your peaks are probably incredibly sloppy. By practicing this style of peaking, you prepare your brain for what you are about to see on the other side. It will also get your muscle memory super used to the act of swinging angles and stopping. Remember earlier how we mentioned that it's difficult for your brain to multitask? If you're able to keep each peak as consistent as possible, it will be a lot easier for you to know the exact inputs that you need to make while peaking angles during stressful moments in your matches. If you're always holding your movement keys for different durations for each peak though, it'll make it much more difficult for you to practice and recreate each peak throughout your matches. This is why this preparing the swing tactic is so powerful, because it makes every single swing more or less the same. Take a look at how much of a difference this makes in my own gameplay.
She's gonna try and finish KO.
Enemy remaining.
Originally, I was just focusing on stopping my movement, but after applying this prepare the swing tactic, it actually had a crazy effect on my gameplay. No longer did I feel like I was just playing deathmatch. For once in quite a long time, it felt like I was practicing. This brings us to our third step in the spider method though, which is know when to crouch. Crouching is something that a lot of players are constantly questioning. Is it bad? Is it good? When should I do it? Crouching can be a deadly habit that many players possess, and it will heavily hinder your ability to climb if it goes unchecked. However, sometimes it can actually be really good, and from watching these top players, I noticed one really awesome way that they can determine whether or not they should crouch. It's actually quite simple. If you're caught in an inescapable position, you should crouch. For example, take a look at this clip from Shroud. Notice how the way that Shroud swings this angle isn't exactly optimal. He's caught with the wall to his left, so he can't exactly strafe anywhere, basically meaning that he's very likely to die if he doesn't kill this player immediately. For those that don't know, it can actually be quite bad to be caught up against a wall like this because it doesn't offer you a lot of room to maneuver. The only direction that you can strafe is right, and because of this, it makes it very easy for the enemy's crosshair to naturally find your head. Shroud recognizes how trash this position is, and he does the only thing that he can do. He crouches. And that's kind of the key factor to determine if you should crouch or not. Basically, if you're going to die very shortly if you don't kill the player, it is a good idea to crouch. Take for example this clip from Ye.
Oh, fuck.
Sure, he's going for a spray transfer, so naturally it might feel appropriate to crouch, but Ye wasn't doing this to be fancy. The enemy Raze is ulting at him, and if he doesn't kill her right now, he is 100% going to die. His only option is to kill the Raze, so he crouches. Right now, it's not about him surviving a little bit longer or trying to outmaneuver his opponents. It's quite literally just about him landing his shot. The same thing could be said for this clip right here.
Nice, you're fucking insane.
Although there is no Raze rocket in both of these first few fights when Ye crouches, he does not get the first shot off in the fight. If Ye were a bit further away in these engagements, it might make more sense for him to strafe a little bit, but the reality is that at this range, if he gets tagged, he's not strafing out of any of these fights. Instead, Ye does the only thing that he can do. He crouches and he prays. Once again, you could see the same exact thing applied in Shroud's clip right here. The two gunfights where he crouches are also the two gunfights where he was caught a bit off guard in close range. He wasn't fully prepared for these fights, and as we said, if he gets tagged, he is done for. This is when you should crouch, when you have no other option but to do so. Crouching hinders your movement and it makes you a bit of an easier target to hit. However, it also will increase your accuracy and briefly give you a chance to change your hitbox, allowing you to potentially avoid your enemy's fire and take them out before they can kill you. Take a look at this clip where I applied crouching in basically a dead loss position. Specifically, crouching is great after you get tagged. If you've already been hit by the enemy, your movement speed is going to be so slow. There is no strafing out of it at that point. In fact, a very common high elo tactic is after tagging players to immediately double down into a spray. This works because there's basically no way for them to avoid your fire after you've been slowed down. They become a super easy target to hit. It's as if they just swung through a harbor wall and are slowed. You'd think with this playstyle of having your feet glued to the floor, you'd pretty much be crouching in every single one of your gunfights, but rather that is not the case. Although you don't want to move nearly as much as to not overcomplicate your aiming process, you still want the ability to strafe in your gunfights if you need to. Make no mistake, if you are fighting multiple enemies at the same time, you still definitely will get traded out immediately. In this case, you'd want to apply counter strafing like we mentioned in the first EA clip. However, at the very least, by not crouching after you land your first kill, if you need to, you can always strafe to avoid the return fire. Only strafe when you don't have the upper hand and desperately need to kill the enemy before they kill you, or when you're already tagged and the enemy are looking to finish you off with a spray. So to recap so far for our spider method, we have remove your room for error, prepare the swing, and know when to crouch. With these steps alone, I was able to get cooking on my routine and start improving my aim. However, I wanted to make sure that I was actively applying these steps and not just losing track of what I was working on after the first few kills in my game. This is why I had to physically change how I approached the game. I needed to not only change how I pressed the keys on my keyboard, but I also needed to change how I moved my mouse. That's where the spider method made all of the difference. Within a week, I was already seeing insane progress. Take a look at this. Here are some clips from a previous aim training video that I created a few weeks ago, covering how I climbed all the way from Ascendant 3 to Immortal 3 with a 70% win rate by implementing a daily aim training routine. Although I saw massive success from this routine, and you can watch the video here, I still don't feel like I have ever really given my movement the attention that it needed. When looking at these clips, I want you to take note of not the kills that I'm getting, but rather how I am getting them. We're going to again slow these down so you can see the problem in each of them.
Molly,
I'm flashing.
landing.
One market.
I'm dogging. Oh, behind us. Oh,
I got it.
fucking my life.
One's U-Haul. I'm gonna blind U-Haul for you guys. 3, 2, 1.
Back, fake flashing.
I think this one.
Default.
Is U-Haul.
No!
Last player standing. Enemy remaining.
Bro, let me fucking upgrade.
I can't. I'm blind. Nice.
You'll notice how these clips are actually a lot of pretty good kills, but the reality is that there is a subtle, more important difference in how I was taking these fights before versus how I'm taking them now. Starting out with this one, notice how the first two kills are both pretty alright, albeit my aim is a little bit shaky in the first one. But in the third kill, notice the panic in my movement. If you compare this to Shroud or Ye, it's not even close to the same thing that they do when swung by an enemy. This is the aim style that I learned originally from watching TenZ. In this specific clip, I am fighting a player with a Sheriff, and because of that, my goal is to not stand still. However, I've noticed that by not standing still, it also makes me significantly less accurate since my counter strafes are, well, not that great. I believe this clip took place before the nerfs as well, which goes to show that run and gun is not something that you should rely on. And while I could say that some of this run and gun is intentional, the truth is that some of it is also panic. Before even committing to this fight, I'm already worried about losing it. Take a look at this round as well, and how although I kind of luck out a bit on RNG, it's not exactly a clip that showcases super precise gunplay. I rolled the dice and I got a kill because of it, but is this something that I actually should rely on in my gameplay? I know for a fact that this clip took place before the accuracy nerfs too. On the current patch, I likely don't get this kill. Would it not have just been better if I stopped on a dime and performed a more accurate flick? When consulting with other coaches about this, something that they brought up is that perhaps players like Shroud and Ye can get away with this sort of style of aiming because they have exceptional aim, so they don't need to worry about being as evasive. But I would actually argue the opposite. In the case of players like Shroud, you'd almost assume that they should be more mobile because they have the mechanical ability to be mobile. However, when I mention this, I seem to recall a clip that I saw of Shroud long ago where he talks about his skills in gaming. He mentions how he doesn't feel like he should be known for his aim, but rather his ability to quickly pick up the mechanics in a game and take advantage of them. If we're taking Shroud for his word when he says this, I would argue that it's not Shroud's aim that makes him look so good, it's his ability to not overcomplicate such a difficult game. Compare this to my fights, I just am not trusting myself enough to land the shots. Take a look at this clutch where I start out by whiffing on the target who isn't even looking at me. I have all of the time in the world to line up the shot, but instead I'm completely rushing it. I'm shooting before I even take the time to flick, which is a telltale sign that I am moving way too fast. Even during the final kill when I'm fighting a target who I clearly have the upper hand against, I am still playing as if I'm super afraid that I'm going to lose the fight. If it is still difficult to see, I want you to take notice specifically of my pistol rounds and how I take fights exactly the same way that TenZ describes. And before I move on to showcase my evolved aim, I think it's pretty important to respond to TenZ's question at the end of this clip. Is this bad?
When I fight someone, I go like this. I'm like I'm adding like counter strafes in. But like when other people are fighting, it looks like this. They see an enemy, they're like. But like what I would do is like I'm gonna add movement in. Maybe that's just bad. I don't know. Is it bad?
Unfortunately, the answer to this is probably the same thing that it is for everything else in Valorant. It depends. There are a lot of situations where strafing makes sense. There's also a lot of situations where run and gun makes sense. I do wholeheartedly believe that Valorant is shifting towards an age where more disciplined players are going to really excel. But if you're trying to get the ultimate edge on your opponents, it's going to be crucial that you learn exactly when you should be switching between these two different styles of aiming. That's what these 3 additional steps on the website will cover, and make sure that you are fully prepared for the new age of aiming in Valorant. Not only do we break break down each of the first 3 steps even more in depth on our site, but we will also teach you the secret tricks that players like Shroud use to consistently pick up multiple kills like seen here. Why does it feel like enemies just walk into players like Shroud and Ye, but they just one-tap you? What is the secret to make sure that you're actually landing your shots when you swing and not just making yourself an easy target? We've broken down a ton of different clips in this video, but the reality is a bunch of you are likely still going to have trouble training the discipline to practice. But it's actually super easy to evolve your gameplay if you know the right habits to apply, and in just a week of practice, I guarantee we can get you climbing in no time. And on that note, it's time to show you exactly how much this new style of aiming has changed my gameplay. In most of these clips, what you're going to see is that my swings just feel infinitely more confident. I'll fast swing an angle, stop, and then my crosshair will snap towards the player's head. I've built up a system that I've been abusing to take fights like this, and it's really working. Some of these clips, of course, are better than others, but all of the kills felt incredibly satisfying, and I've basically spiked my confidence in the game through the roof. It's actually pretty easy to see when you compare this one ghost clip on Ascent to the ghost clip that we showed in Icebox earlier. Notice how I've completely changed up my movement patterns. In the Icebox clip, I am strafing and trying to be super evasive, but in the Ascent clip, I'm standing completely still and just taking my time with my shots. It's crazy. In many ways, I feel invulnerable. Oftentimes in Valorant, it can feel like you're constantly getting one-tapped, but when you really slow down the game like this, you realize how much time you actually have in each round. Before, I was always so afraid that if I stood still, I'd instantly die, but the more practice I got with the spider method, the more I realized that that is just not the case, even in Immortal. This is exactly what I needed in the new act, and if you guys are interested in mastering your aim in the new season of Valorant with me, be sure to head on over to SkillCapped and get started on your journey today.